My name is Shayna Cohen, and I am a graduate student at Florida State University studying applied American politics and policy. I previously served as a student senator and an activist for the collegiate Jewish community at my school, advocating for student resolutions in support of the IHRA definition. I led the effort to found the Jewish Student Union at my university and currently serve as the co-graduate advisor for the organization and the co-chair of the Jewish Student Life Task Force at Florida State. I'm honored here and excited today to introduce our guest speaker. Katharina Von Schnurbein was appointed the first European Commissioner Coordinator on Combating Antisemitism in December 2015. Prior to this, she worked for 5 years as an advisor to the EU Commission President Jose Manuel Barroso on dialogue with the religions and non-confessional organizations. Katharina started working for the European Commission in 2002 as a press officer for the EU delegation in Prague. With enlargement, she moved to Brussels as a spokesperson for employment, social affairs, and equal opportunities under the responsibility of the Czech EU Commissioner Vladimír Špindla. She spent the academic year from 2017 to 2018 as the EU Fellow at the European Union Institute in Florence to research effective measures to combat anti-Semitism across Europe. Thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm going to jump right into our first question. You were appointed as the European Union's first coordinator on combating anti-Semitism, combating discrimination against Jewish people, but you yourself are not Jewish. What did that journey look like and what has it meant to you?
Hi, Shayna. It's such a pleasure to be with you and to be with the students that are listening to us today. I'm really impressed by all the actions and activities that you have already done in your short student life. So congratulations. Yes, for me, I have to say, I was, when I had the possibility to be appointed as the European Commission's first coordinator on combating anti-Semitism, and we have now added also the aspect of fostering Jewish life, because we think the two really go together. I felt that it was really a very good next step. I had dealt with the Jewish community, in particular the religious one, in the context of being advisor to the president of the commission on the dialogue with religions, and anti-Semitism had been a small part of that. But I think that as we had seen from the beginning of the 2000s, really an increase of anti-Semitism, including lethal attacks in Europe from Islamist side, but more recently also from right-wing extremism, attacks on Jewish schools, on synagogues, on the Jewish Museum in Brussels. So it felt that this was really the right thing to do. And I was really encouraged also to see that from the Jewish side, there was a willingness to engage. So my first main goal in the first years was to reach out to the Jewish communities all across Europe and to listen to their concerns. In Europe, Jewish communities are very diverse. In some countries, they are very small. This is still a direct consequence of the Shoah. And in some countries, they are more religious, in most countries rather secular, but you have a great diversity. You have some Sephardic, some more Ashkenazi, and also it was important for me to get to know them. And so I traveled a lot and I engaged with them. I listened also to the challenges they face in concrete terms, from security to lack of knowledge about, for example, the Shoah, or about the challenges they face, lack of awareness also among state actors. And so very often, for example, we went together to see the national governments and to address certain issues. That led very quickly to the acknowledgement that you cannot fight what you cannot define, and the IHRA definition, which you have been engaged so much as well, was created, put together, agreed in 2016. And for us, it was very important to recognize this as a basis to addressing anti-Semitism. Why? Because we had in a survey seen that the issues that are addressed in the IHRA definition reflect to a very large extent what European Jews regard as anti-Semitic. And so for us, it was a natural step to say, okay, we take a victim-based approach, a community-based approach when it comes to other forms of discrimination. So we will also take that when it comes to the Jewish community. So dealing with the Jewish community, liaising with them, being in dialogue is a big chunk of my work. The other aspect is, of course, to make policy recommendations to the European Commission, to the political leadership. And once these have been agreed, then together with my team to also implement those. And as part of this, we adopted last year in October, the European Commission's first ever strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life, which holds a large number, over 70 individual actions that can be implemented now in the next 10 years on EU level and together with the member states and the Jewish communities. I'm sure we can discuss more about this later on, but basically we have created structures first, we've engaged in dialogue, and now we are at a new policy level to ensure that really all across Europe we bring an end to anti-Semitism. I know it sounds too ambitious, but I think we have to have very high ambition in order to achieve next steps and progress.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And honestly, it's really inspiring to hear how successful you've been able to be in such a short time at such a high level. I know that a little bit earlier you were talking about how the community decided upon the IHRA definition. I know that at the campus level, a lot of students would ask, like, why this definition and not another one? And I really appreciated what you said about how it really comes from the Jewish community that supports this definition so strongly. Is there any other reason that you would cite or that you would recommend that college students are aware of surrounding its history that makes it an ideal choice?
Well, I think when you look at the concrete parts of it, for example, from the survey that I mentioned, we know that Holocaust denial or the allegation that Jews capitalize from the Shoah is seen from the side of the Jewish community as the most pernicious form of anti-Semitism. But when it comes to which forms of anti-Semitism Jews in Europe hear most, it is Israel-related anti-Semitism. And so I think this definition covers a lot of different forms in a very comprehensive way. This doesn't mean, that you don't have gray areas or that it's not always straightforward to see when a red line is crossed, but it gives a very good indication. So we see it, because it is non-legally binding, as a very good educational tool and a tool to recognize bias. And I think what is very good about the definition as well, that it says criticism of Israel, like that leveled at any other country, cannot be seen as anti-Semitism. So, there is no threat to freedom of speech, as is often alleged. You can criticize the government of Israel, but it is very clear when it is about the existence of the state of Israel, then clearly a red line is crossed, and we need to call out anti-Semitism. There's another aspect, and this is very important in the European context, where we have strong hate speech and hate crime legislation all across Europe. The IHRA definition says that whether an anti-Semitic act is criminal is defined by law. And that is important also with regards to court cases. We don't change the law, but what we want to change is the awareness in society about what is anti-Semitic and what the Jewish community, of course not everybody, but as I said, the large majority in the European context certainly perceives as anti-Semitic. And that, I think, is the real added value of the IHRA definition, to help member states and also civil society and sports clubs and universities and so on to use this definition. We brought out for Europe a guidance tool in which we describe, together with the IHRA, certain incidents that we can identify as anti-Semitic based on the IHRA definition, and then certain actions by the EU member states or by civil society, by public entities, by universities as well, in reaction to incidents, also based on the IHRA definition. So we tried to give this practical tool a concrete support from best practices in order to make sure that it is actually being used, because the only way it has effect is when it is being used.
Thank you. I mean, I really appreciate that. That's definitely something that I'm going to take back to all of the students that I go to college with, and I hope that everybody who watches our conversation later also benefits from. And kind of talking about some of my younger peers, I know that some of us sometimes feel overwhelmed, or that it's difficult to find a place in these important conversations. Could you talk a little bit about how you've cooperated with young people specifically in your efforts on combating anti-Semitism?
I have to say, we have cooperated or reached out to European student representations from the beginning. Actually, even before I was in this post, I was in touch with the European Union of Jewish Students, which is an umbrella organization for the student unions that are on national level or in different universities in different EU countries. So we have many layers there. I find their impressions and their advice and also their ideas very valuable in our work. We, for example, together with the EUGS, produced a survey on how young European Jews see anti-Semitism and Jewish life. They reached out through their networks, but we also, I mean, it is a representative network, so a representative survey. So we also went beyond, and it showed, and it was important for us to know, that students perceive some forms of anti-Semitism even stronger than the overall Jewish population. That they were more victims of anti-Semitism, maybe not surprisingly, on the internet. Yeah, and to see together with them what we can do about it. We've also now most recently started to support them financially. We want them to develop programs also to address anti-Semitism on campuses. So we issued a grant of over 600,000 euro. I don't know how much that is. It's maybe $680,000 or so. And this is to empower them and to be able to support also local projects in universities to address anti-Semitism. I really think it is key. I mean, we often talk about the freedom of research and the freedom of speech and the freedom of thought, and I think it is key to have and to guard that in universities, and to be able to have a civilized and a constant exchange also with adversaries, also with people who have a different opinion, and to keep that dialogue going. And in Europe, the situation is slightly different. I would say in universities, I think there is still a bit more dialogue ongoing between groups that think totally differently. But it is a challenge. To build bridges and to make sure that we keep talking, I think is important. And so we want to make sure that the EUGS is also empowered to do this.
Thank you. And I also wanted to get into a little bit more specifically about what you just mentioned with the newly adopted EU strategy. In terms of combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life, is there anything specific that the plan that you would explain that the plan addresses in terms of addressing anti-Semitism on campus or discrimination in particular faced by young Jews?
Yeah, so the young Jews have been very much involved also in the consultation process leading to the strategy. In fact, the EUGS, they are a member of all the different bodies that we have. We have every 3 months a round table here of the umbrella organizations in Brussels. We have twice a year a working group where we meet between Jewish communities and member states representatives, so states of the European, the 27 EU member states, representatives, special envoys, representatives from ministries meeting together with Jewish communities to discuss specific issues. So they are fully involved and members of these processes. Also, they have been involved in giving us ideas for the strategy. What we said very clearly is that schools and campuses must be safe places for all. And so security is an important aspect. We have seen this in the European context as well, that, for example, when it comes to BDS, after certain initiatives, that Jews can feel unsafe, or that their mezuzahs are being removed from their dorms, or their kippot being taken off, or something like that. So this kind of attacks is really unacceptable. Yeah, while, as I said, dialogue must be possible, expressing ideas must also be possible. But when it comes to threatening, or to groups feeling threatened by expressions from others, this is unacceptable. So I believe that the university has a key role also, for example, when it comes to the education of teachers. If we want to look into how, for example, we will educate in the future about the Shoah, we need to train teachers at the university level already. Yeah. If we want to address anti-Semitism in schools, that means that not only the history teacher or the religious teacher is supposed to know about anti-Semitism, but really even the sports teacher must recognize an anti-Semitic remark as such when overhearing it in the courtyard. Yeah. So this kind of, I think, awareness is built on campus as well. We have different also corporations. We cooperate, for example, with UNESCO and the OSCE in training for teach the teacher trainings on addressing anti-Semitism through education. We have different reform support mechanisms from the European Commission to help member states who want to change, for example, their curricula, or to want to have more of a focus on certain aspects in their universities. This is all complicated because we have many layers involved and many different competences. But I think it is with a lot of cooperation, it can really change something. One important aspect with regards to, and we are just ahead now of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, of keeping the memory of the Shoah alive, and of finding also new ways in how to relaying this to young people. We want to create, as it is this year, the European Year of Youth in Europe, a young European ambassadors network to promote Holocaust remembrance, to organize Holocaust remembrance events and ceremonies in their immediate environment. So all of this is not going to happen overnight, but I think it is important to say, we now put the things on the rails in order to make sure that in the course of this strategy until 2030, we will see a change in the way the Holocaust is being seen as a singular event in history.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, especially what you were saying about International Holocaust Remembrance Day. We do something very similar at the campus level, where we bring in a speaker Last year was the first year that we did it, and we got really positive feedback from students who didn't have much of a background knowledge on it before. It was really powerful. Could you explain a little bit broader some of the main challenges that you feel that Europe is facing when it comes to anti-Semitism?
Well, maybe now that we are ahead of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I could start with the issue of Holocaust distortion and trivialization and also denial that we have seen on the rise, also in the context of the pandemic. I think that over the past years already, it started, that we saw false comparisons of Nazi actions and Nazi policies with other actions, also in connection with Israel. But now we see this, for example, very worryingly with regards to more remedies to the pandemic. So we have seen on European streets people wearing Stars of David, saying unvaccinated, comparing themselves to Jews that were sent in cattle wagons to the gas chambers. So for me, this says two things. First, there is a lack of compass. So not knowing anymore where we go with our comparisons and with our how we handle the current situation. I know that this pandemic has been very difficult for many. I have 4 children myself. I can tell you, working and homeschooling and being in lockdown and so on is a challenge. Yeah, but to these kind of comparisons trivialize also the experience of the victims and of the survivors. So this is one aspect that I think is really dangerous. And then on the second hand, we also, of course, have a total lack of knowledge in terms of facts. So what actually happened? This is why it's so important also to use this day, but also throughout the year to relay information about the Shoah. And we have done a study where we looked into the increase of anti-Semitic content online in January and February 2020 and compared to January, February 2021. So just before the pandemic and then in the middle of the pandemic, in German and French language. We did it in French and German because in English there's already some data available, and it was for Twitter, Facebook, and Telegram. And we saw for German language a 13-fold increase in anti-Semitic content online in this 1 year, and for French a 7-fold increase. So I think this also shows, we also know that whenever something pops up in the internet, sooner or later it takes to the streets. And we saw very worrying outbursts of anti-Semitism in May during the Gaza crisis, and to see how people were marching towards synagogues that have nothing to do with Israel, really. They are synagogues for European citizens, and threatening Jews, threatening our citizens because there was a war going on elsewhere. Yeah. So I think this is something that we have seen very worryingly. And then the challenge, I believe, is also that anti-Semitism, also because of the pandemic, but already before, is reaching more into the mainstream of society, that people more overtly make an anti-Semitic remark or drop a conspiracy idea without being challenged. And so my plea has always been to call out anti-Semitism. I think everyone can do it. When you hear something, say something, to have this discussion also among civil society. And it's not easy, especially if it happens in your own environment, in your own family or friends, I don't know, on the parents' board or something like that. Yeah, it is not easy, but it needs to be challenged.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I definitely agree. Even talking to some of my peers about it, they sometimes feel like it's not the right time or the right place to speak up and say something about it. But
I understand it, huh? I mean, it's understandable. You don't always want to pick a fight, but letting it pass unchallenged in the end, I think, can lead to polarization and to hatred and to an increase also of seeing the other as an enemy. And so it's really, I think it's a service to all of us to challenge anti-Semitic remarks, and for that matter, hateful remarks against any other group.
Absolutely. I know that you just touched a little bit on some of the impact that international incidences abroad can have on the EU. Could you talk a little bit about how the EU cooperates with Israel and with other international stakeholders in this field?
Yes, we've been cooperating very closely with Israel, but also with the US and many other partner countries of the European Union on the level of our own network. Let's say among the special envoys, we have one network that brings together the European special envoys, and then we have one global one where we meet twice a year with all those from across the globe, together with Jewish community representatives, to exchange best practices. And so for not every one of us to reinvent the wheel all the time and to join our forces. So this is one aspect where Israel has been central. But in the strategy, we say that Israel is a key partner for the European Union, including in the global fight against anti-Semitism. We have been working with Israel since 2005, in particular on anti-Semitism in EU-Israel seminars that take place once a year. But we want to upgrade those seminars to make them more operational, more output-oriented, and to really cooperate in fields of common interest, for example, with regards to addressing online anti-Semitism. I think this is an issue where the platforms are global, and so we also need to act globally. And certainly we can cooperate closely with Israel also on the tech side of this. I think it's also important for us as Europeans to understand that Israel is the most European country in the Middle East. It's the only democracy in the Middle East, and we have a lot of ties. We have also very close cooperation when it comes to economy. In fact, the EU is the number one trade partner for Israel. We have significantly increased our trade since the last years. I mean, since 2002, the first year from which data is at all available, we had a trade of 23 billion euro, so it's maybe 25 billion dollar, and now 2019, 33.1 billion. So this is an increase of 43% in this short period. And I think it shows the close interaction, because trade in the end means interaction of people as well. No? And we, in 2019, also were the first trading partner for the outward investment, followed by the US, of course, and China. So also in that area, I think there is close cooperation. And the EU continues to be involved with regards to the Middle East peace process. We welcome the normalization agreements. We see this as a chance also, to develop further on this road. So there are many fields of cooperation, and we see that we have many common interests there, including, by the way, on security. Israel's security is not put into question. It is very important for Europe, and it needs to be supported fully by us.
It's very informative, especially from a student perspective for students who might not be as familiar with the ins and outs. I think it's I just learned a lot in the last 2 minutes just with that, so thank you. One question that I did have, especially when I was advocating with my peers explaining anti-Semitism and Jewish identity, when we use the IHRA definition to explain anti-Semitism and Jewish identity issues to our peers, one thing that really was powerful for us is that it was incredibly comprehensive and that it allowed us to communicate with people who had like a very smaller basis of knowledge to begin the conversation with. Prior to the working definition being adopted, did you see any significant gaps in the conversation surrounding anti-Semitism and discrimination that the definition specifically addressed and fulfilled that need for?
Well, from the European Commission side, we had conversations with Jewish organizations, but as I said, it was mainly in the context of the religious side, and then, of course, some big Jewish advocacy organizations. But what we were really lacking was the knowledge about how the Jewish communities across Europe actually differ, how dynamic they are, how diverse they are, to have a viewpoint of the whole spectrum. And in that regard, then the IHRA definition is also important because it addresses the different forms of anti-Semitism that sound with different communities in a different way. So I think this is what the IHRA definition really gave us. And it wasn't a given. Huh? I mean, in the beginning, there was also a lot of opposition to this, in particular, because it addresses also Israel-related anti-Semitism. And I think what people needed to understand is that it is important that Israel as a country is important for Jews. It is there is a connection, whether you actually have relatives there or not, but it has been there for many millennia. But this doesn't automatically mean that you agree with everything that the Israeli government does. And to make this distinction, I think is something where the IHRA definition can be really helpful. Yeah. And to not hold Jews in our countries, in the US or in Europe, responsible for what the government of Israel does. And I think there was definitely, and still is, a lack of awareness. And here, again, the IHRA definition can help. And by the way, it also helps simply by creating a discussion about it. And the more discussion we have, the more we also see how diverse the views are. So we, after adopting it by the European Commission, then the European Parliament endorsed it, and we had two council declarations. So the council is the representative of all the states of the European Union, which specifically dealt with anti-Semitism, with the security aspects of it as well, but then also the whole range from education to data collection to victim support and so on. So we had the whole range, and as part of that, a clear reference to the IHRA definition. So I think it was really important to build these structures and to use the existing channels to pass the message.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I can't imagine what it would have been like for me on campus, even just 2 years ago, trying to explain some of these issues without it. And it's only because it's gotten so mainstream because of advocates at a much higher level that we are able to have those tools and continue to promote them. So I know that myself and a lot of my peers really appreciate a lot of the work that you've done. And kind of speaking specifically about some of the work that's already been done, even though there's much more work to do, I know that a lot of people are continuing to advocate, including yourself and all of our wonderful team members. Out of all of the stuff that you've been able to work on so far, is there something that you're the most proud of or results that you see as the most significant?
Well, I do think that establishing the IHRA definition as the reference point when it comes to anti-Semitism was really central. Basically, all EU member states, all states of the IHRA, of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which are currently 35, have adopted the definition. And then within the EU, 27, 18 member states have then specifically also passed government decisions or parliamentary resolutions to say how they will use it. To see that this gradually has permeated then into civil society, that we saw adoptions by sports clubs. A lot of football clubs in Europe are now adopting, as we sent, for example, together with several special envoys, a joint letter to all the Premier League and big football clubs across Europe, saying, adopt this, please, and use it in the training for your staff, and also with regards to your fans. So to see how it really became a tool and is being used in very concrete ways. Not undisputed, as I said, and it's also not the perfect definition. I think, it is a definition that was adopted unanimously by the members of the IHRA, which I think is very significant. And none of the other definitions that can be used also, for academic purposes, we can have several definitions. It's not as such an issue, but none of those have been endorsed by states. And so I think this is really how we have seen the momentum of the IHRA definition.
Thank you. And yeah, I definitely think that the momentum of the IHRA definition, like I already said, has had a large impact on my college, and I think colleges across the U.S. as well. My mother, actually, she has 4 children, and she isn't Jewish herself, but combating anti-Semitism is something very important to her because of her children and because of her family. And I know that you've said in the past that anti-Semitism is not only a threat to the Jewish community, but to society, to society at large. Could you talk a little bit about what you meant by that and how you see it impacting the larger community?
So I think anti-Semitism is always a sign for something else in society going wrong. It means that the other, rather, I should say, is being put into question. That we are maybe closing down space for civil society, that we are questioning our democratic values, or we are questioning the elite, we are questioning the political system. So I think this is what anti-Semitism traditionally, in particular also in the European context, has shown, that it is only the tip of the iceberg. And unfortunately, I think we have seen this in Europe. We had, as I said, for example, when it comes to Islamism, we had significant and serious attacks, lethal attacks also in the past decades. And the same type of representatives of this Islamist ideology then in 2015 attacked Charlie Hebdo, which is a French newspaper, a magazine that is caricatures and challenges society in various ways, and so this was seen as the enemy by the attackers. I think this is when general society realized that these attacks before on the Jewish community actually were a challenge to all of us, to our freedoms, to our media freedom, to our freedom of speech, and that what the Jewish community had experienced for some time was then had a direct effect on general society. And it is, I think, not by coincidence that my position was created in 2015 at the end. So Charlie Hebdo happened in January 2015, and then in December this post was created together, by the way, with a coordinator on combating anti-Muslim hatred, because as a reaction to these attacks that were caused by extremists and Islamists, the general Muslim population was also targeted with a lot of hatred, and also those who are perfectly integrated and part of our society and share our values suddenly received a lot of hatred. So I think it's important to understand this, and understanding anti-Semitism helps us also, I think, to have a clear compass in how to stand up for minorities and address hatred when we see it.
I really agree. So thank you for sharing that perspective. Kind of talking a little bit about the differences between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and the importance of defining these terms. How do you see the two linked together in these conversations?
I believe that anti-Semitism often hides behind anti-Zionism. So, if we look at Zionism as the movement to create a homeland for the Jewish people, then anti-Zionism is to deny the Jewish people their homeland. And so to say that this is only criticism of Israel, I think we've already discussed. You can criticize the government, no problem. But anti-Zionism goes beyond. It means actually that Israel should not exist in the place where it does. Anti-Zionism is often portrayed as just being a political expression of criticism, but I think that often anti-Semitism can hide behind it, and it is important to recognize and dismantle this. And here again, the IHRA definition can be helpful, I believe, in detecting those biases. And we have also seen maybe that from our surveys that actually 8 out of 10 European Jews feel blamed for something done by the state of Israel. And 7 in 10 even say that the Arab-Israeli conflict impacts on their feeling of safety. So I think it goes beyond just words.
I know that some of the conversations that we have at the college level, when some of our peers have concerns with the IHRA definition, a lot of their concerns is that the IHRA shuts down criticism of Israel by simply labeling anti-Semitism as just anti-Zionism. But would your response kind of be with what you seem to be talking about, that the definition can actually be helpful in having those conversations and making sure that we can articulate the difference and recognize when something truly is just governmental criticism versus discriminatory?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, freedom of expression is a fundamental right for which we have fought for many centuries, and we are not certainly going to give this up. It is something that the European Commission, as the guardian of the treaties here in Europe, defends and stands up for. And we discussed already that the IHRA is a non-legally binding tool. So, the law is not changed. The law with regards to freedom of speech is not changed, and we have different laws in the US and in Europe. So I think this is very important, and to allow us to say the things that we think are anti-Semitic and to call them anti-Semitic. It gives also the other person the right to say, I do not see this as anti-Semitic, and because, but so far we were not in that position. I think so far people who perceived something as anti-Semitic could not refer to any document or to any definition, and this is why there is a bit of a unrest at the moment, because now we can actually refer to saying that this definition that has been agreed by so many states and so many public entities and civil society organizations, and that reflects the vast majority of thinking among the Jewish population as well, is something concrete to which we can refer, and that helps us to also defend those who feel targeted by anti-Semitism.
Thank you. And I know that we're kind of reaching the end of our conversation, so I did want to ask if you had any closing message or closing advice that you would want to give to both people that are going to listen and then just young Jewish activists and allies in general to take away from your experiences?
Yes. Well, I think actually I would recommend you to refer to a study guidelines that the EUGS, the European Union of Jewish Students, has published. It's called Supporting Your Jewish Students Guide, where you can, engage in advocacy, and it gives concrete examples of how to engage. I think that trainings on advocacy are very important. That standing up for each other, reaching out also to other groups. This is something that we have seen as very powerful, and we've also funded projects where different groups meet and learn to stand up for each other. I think it's an important sign also for society, and to proudly also show your Jewish life. We have this fostering Jewish life aspect is very strong in our strategy. For example, we have a European tree strategy, which foresees the planting of 3 billion trees in Europe until 2030. And now we've linked this to Tu B'Shvat and said, in the Jewish tradition, there is already the aspect of caring for environment by planting trees. So why not combine this? And I think to just let your fellow students know about these traditions, about Hanukkah, about Shabbat dinners, this kind. I think really it, and I know, for example, my children, they love going to Shabbat dinners. It's and sometimes when it's Friday night, they regret and they start singing themselves Shabbat songs because it is something that has an impact, and that really I think shows also this the richness of Jewish life. So don't be shy. But share your traditions and live them as well.
Thank you. I think that your work is really inspiring, and I learned a lot just by listening to you for an hour. And I hope that everybody else who listens to our conversations gets as much out of it as I did. And I really appreciate your time and energy and effort into advocating for the Jewish community in the EU. And honestly, I think your work has a strong global impact, so worldwide as well.
Well, thank you, Shayna. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you, and very inspiring for me as well. Thanks a lot. All the best to you and to your fellow students.